I'm going to attempt to do something here that I don't think is pretty typical of elected politicians, elected representatives. I'm going to try to give you a behind the scenes look at why your government is broken, how it doesn't work, how you are not a part of it at all. You don't have an elected representative government. Don't let me bury the headline. Don't let me bury the lead. That's the lead here. You do not have an elected representative government. That's not what you have. What you have is a certified oligarchy. And what I mean by that is that we do have elections, they happen. And regardless of our debates and our back and forth about the integrity, we talk a lot about election integrity and election security. Election corruption is a popular term in my circles. But all of that is really beside the point. It's the election almost doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter because it's all based on a false premise. The premise upon which our elections are conducted in the United States of America is the idea that whoever it is that you elect to office is going to go into whatever role you've elected them to and engage in a good faith deliberative process in order to arrive at the best possible public policy to serve you, the constituent, who has elected that person, appointed that person to the position of representation. None of that actually happens. That's not what happens at all. What actually happens is that you elect somebody to go play a role in a quasi-scripted theater. And that theater takes place here in the state of Minnesota. It takes place over the course of what is euphemistically called a legislative session. And during the many months of the legislative session, we have committee hearings where we pretend to care about what the public thinks about policies that have been proposed. Those are largely organized by whoever's in charge, whoever's the chair of the committee, to basically present a pageant of people who already agree with what they're going to do anyway, and to minimize and attempt to shut out to the degree possible there's this window of believability. Like, they have to maintain a certain window of believability that there actually is some sort of back and forth good faith deliberation taking place. And so they try to keep that window as open as they need to in order to maintain the perception that you actually live in a representative democracy. But believe you me, they make sure that it is shut as much as they possibly can to keep people out, to keep your voice, especially if you're a dissenter, out of the process. And ultimately, none of that even matters anyway. It doesn't matter at all. Because once you get to the point in the legislative session where we're at now, towards the end of session, where we're in what's called conference committees. And if you don't know, that's where the House has passed a bill off of the floor. The Senate has passed a similar bill off the floor. And then the conference committee is tasked with trying to resolve the differences between those two bills. Because under the Constitution in the state of Minnesota, in order for a bill to become law, it has to be passed in identical fashion with the language matching exactly in both the Senate and the House. And so the conference committee's task is to resolve whatever differences exist between the two bills so that that can take place and a bill can actually be presented to the governor for signature. That's the place we're at in the process right now. And what's happening during that process is we're seeing entire new provisions just inserted into bills arbitrarily that never were part of the original bills that were passed off of either floor in either chamber. We're seeing provisions added to bills that were never even heard in committee. And what this is an example. That's your real government. Your real government is not the elected representative theater that takes place between January 3rd and once we get to this point. The real government, the actual policy making, the decision making that affects your life, that occurs in smoky backfilled rooms where they decide what the legislation is going to be. And then through the force of the gavel in either chamber, they impose that upon the rest of us and through extension upon you. And so you live in what's actually a certified oligarchy, which is where the election gets certified. It does. And once it's certified, it's real. Like whatever your position on the 2020 election, Joe Biden was certified as president of the United States. And so he has that power. And with that power, he does what he will. And similarly, with the power that the majority has in the state of Minnesota, whether it's in the House, the Senate, or the governor's office, they use it as they will. And it really has nothing whatsoever to do with your desires, your input, your scrutiny gets no traction whatsoever. And I want to provide you with a couple of examples of this. So let's take a look at some things that happened recently on the House floor. So I want to give you a little bit of background on this one. So we were in debate last night, Friday, at the time of this recording, it would be last night, for several hours, over 3 hours, regarding adoption of a committee report. And that's one of the reports that comes back from one of these conference committees to basically try to resolve these differences. And the reason we were in debate so long about adopting that committee report is because that conference committee, even though it had one of our members, the lead on the Children and Families Committee, which is early childhood education, even though it had one of our members appointed to it, it never actually met in any real official fashion. And it certainly didn't get his approval on what the committee report was. He was never provided the opportunity to sign off. Which is something that is his right as an appointed member of the conference committee. And so we were objecting to that and objecting to the entire process. And there were several of us that were on the list to speak, which is our right. You know, we have the right to rise to speak to any matter that is before the House. And it is the obligation of the Speaker of the House to uphold that right and to recognize our ability to be heard on any given motion. There is no time limit on debate. You do not get to shut down debate arbitrarily because you want to. But in fact, that is what happened here on the House floor. Take a look.
Well, it prevails. We are on the motion to adopt. Representative Pinto.
Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Pinto requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The clerk will take the roll on the motion to adopt.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Going to be a long day,
Yes,
Madam
they
Speaker.
Did. Yes, they did. It's going to
Madam
be
Speaker,
a long
we're right
week,
to be
Madam
recognized on the
Speaker.
question.
It's going to be really tough to catch
Madam
a
Speaker,
flight
I
on
have the
19th.
floor.
Close the
Madam
roll.
Speaker.
Madam Speaker, we're
Apparently
rising
we
to be
just break the
recognized
rules
for debate
around
on the
here.
question. Madam Speaker, point of order.
Representative Doubt, you are not in order.
Madam
we are
Speaker,
in
point
a
of
roll
parliamentary
call.
inquiry.
Madam Speaker, I had the floor.
Madam
You do
Speaker,
not
point
have
of
the
parliamentary
floor.
inquiry.
You have not been recognized.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
The clerk will close the roll.
Madam Speaker, parliamentary inquiry. We have
Representative Demuth, you are out of order.
All right, I
There
think
are
that's probably
70
enough of that.
ayes
I mean,
and
you get the
0
general
nays.
idea, right? The speaker just decided that we weren't going to we weren't going to conduct our business according to the normal rules of order. That's what happened, and that is as bizarre as it looks. That is not typical. The bedlam that you just witnessed there is not typical of what happens on the House floor. The reason it went down that way is because that was an extreme abuse of power, an extreme abuse of power. And if you're wondering why, like, why would she do that? Well, let me show you. Let me show you what her motives were. Because she told us on a hot mic.
For this body, the actual times that those conference committee reports were signed by the conferees.
And they won't get to talk anymore. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Leader Demuth.
They won't get to talk. They won't be able to talk anymore. That was her objective. That was the motive behind the action that you saw previously, to shut us up. And listen, fine, whatever, shut me up. Okay, that's fine. Problem, I have an election certificate. I represent 43,000 Minnesotans. So when you shut me up, you're not just shutting me up. You're shutting up the people I represent. And that is called suppressing democracy. And that's what the DFL is doing. That's what Democrats in Minnesota are all about right now, suppressing democracy. And the hypocrisy of that needs to be called out, because these are the folks, you know, they passed ridiculous election reforms earlier this year that just make our election system a complete mockery. And we'll overcome those. Believe you me, we're going to overcome the rules of the game that they have modified by playing them better than they can. But even so, the premise behind which the passage of those reforms was offered is that democracy is so sacred. It's so important that we provide as much access to possible to Minnesotans to be heard, to have their voice heard, and to be represented by their government. It's such poppycock. And yes, I just used the word poppycock. Clearly, they have no interest whatsoever in making sure that the people of Minnesota are heard. If they did, then they would follow their own rules. They would follow the order of the House, the rules of the House that they passed themselves, and they would allow us to represent you in the House of Representatives. They don't allow that because they don't respect you. They don't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from us. They don't respect democracy. Democracy is a sham. You do not have democracy in the state of Minnesota or, frankly, in the United States of America. What you have is certified oligarchy. And the sooner you get your head around that, the sooner you'll be free. You are not going to be free so long as you buy into the lie that because we have elections every 2 years, you're represented through a deliberative democratic process. You are not. Today proved that. The end of this session has proved that. Our politics is entirely about who holds power and the integrity of who holds power. And that's what needs to be your primary concern. Who has integrity? Who cares about you? Who cares about actually hearing your voice and having it represented? Versus who just cares about moving an agenda and wielding power because they have it. Ken Martin, the chair of the Democrat Party, tweeted recently, proudly bragging that they're using the power that they have. Using the power. That was the actual phrase that he said. I don't know. It doesn't sound very American to me. Using power. What sounds American to me is representing people, serving people. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to servant leadership? Whatever happened to words like posterity, forward thinking, thinking about the future, thinking about sustainability, thinking about where we're headed and whether or not the torch that we're passing down to the next generation will remain lit long enough for them to pass it to the generation that comes after them. These aren't modern political considerations in American politics. And that's our fault, yours and mine, because we continue to buy into the lie that the people who we're sending here are here to take care of us. They're not. They're here to take care of themselves. And you need to get engaged because they get away with what they get away with because you're not paying attention. And they laugh at you. I see it every day. They laugh at you because they know you're not paying attention and they know you won't do anything. And that will continue to work so long as it continues to be true. The responsibility is on you. So man up, get involved,